Greetings, aliens. This is TJ, and you're watching Studio Sessions with Astronoize. Today, I want to share with you three of what I think are the most useful plugins. I use them in every single mixdown session, and hopefully, after you learn about these, you will too. I feel like they improve the sound of my mixes, and like I said, I don't know if I can go a single mix without maybe not all of them, but at least one of them in every mix. Who am I kidding? I use all three of them in every mix. Let's get started. First off, being an EQ. This is pretty self-explanatory. I have videos that explain what these do. Basically, you're just shaping your sound. So whatever channel you have it plugged into, be it a synth, drums, or whatever, you can kind of further just tailor and craft your sound into whatever, boosting and cutting and shaping your frequency spectrum, which is very, very, very useful in the context of a full song, because an individual instrument may sound good, but when you introduce it into a mix down session with other instruments playing, you're going to have some conflicting frequencies, and an EQ will most certainly help out with boosting or cutting unwanted frequencies. Moving on. A compressor. This is, again, I have a video explaining exactly, the controls and how to use one of these better, but this just tames your dynamic range, the quietest parts and the loudest parts. Sometimes there's a big difference between that whenever you record, especially live instruments. Software synths, usually you can just adjust the velocity to make them, kind of not too loud in certain parts and too quiet. But sometimes live recordings have those spikes real quick and then really quiet parts. And you want to just kind of compress everything so that everything kind of sounds consistent, and it's more audible throughout an entire mix when you got a bunch of other things playing. And like I said, just go watch that video if you want to learn exactly how to use all these controls. Get to know a compressor. That I use them in almost every single mix. I like to use these on buses, groups of instruments, rather than always just slapping one on just an individual instrument. So yeah, try that out. Watch that video. Moving on. Some sort of saturation or harmonic exciter or distortion unit is going to add depth to your sound. So what it basically does is it adds extra harmonics into your sound. Your sound sounds basically the same. It's just going to sound louder as I add more distortion in. But what that's doing in essence is it's adding more harmonic content, more frequencies. Like if you opened up an analyzer, which we'll get to later, then you're going to see more spikes within the frequency spectrum, because this is adding more harmonics to your fundamental that you already have in there. This just pumps up the volume without really pumping up the volume. You don't have to just, say, oh, this sound is getting lost. Let me just pump up this fader, because it's not gonna work all the time. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, try using some harmonic or saturation excitement. So those are the three main staples. Honestly, this almost looks identical to basically every one of my tracks, aside from the compression. I don't always need a compressor on every track, but usually I go with some EQ first. That's generally always the first plugin on every instrument, just so I can tame the frequencies and adjust them accordingly, and then some saturation afterwards. And I usually go a little bit more subtle like that, like 1 dB or less. A little goes a long way. But yeah, and then compression on like drum buses and stuff like that. But here's a little bonus ones, and these are free ones. These were all stock plugins. Almost every DAW, I'm sure every DAW by now, it's 2020, is gonna come with an EQ, a compressor, and some sort of distortion, saturation, harmonic excitement. So yeah, get to know those 3 plugins. Those are excellent. Use them in your mixes. You will enjoy. And so moving on to the freebies, the little cherries on top is Span. This is a frequency spectrum analyzer, and I've got a lot of videos that kind of show me using it and how it works, and this thing is a beast. But just real quick, it just shows you your frequency spectrum. It's going to show you 20 hertz, which is your low, your bass, your sub. This is 20 hertz is actually sub. And then it goes all the way up to 20K. And it just shows you throughout like your frequencies you got playing. So quickly, sometimes depending on your listening environment, you can't hear everything exactly as it truly is, and you open up an analyzer and go, oh yeah, this frequency is like way louder than everything. I need to go tame that with an EQ. Or you're like, oh, there's a dip in this frequency range, maybe that's why it's sounding so thin, right? So let me go back in and add some snares at 200 hertz, or with an EQ, just kind of boost some frequencies that you're kind of missing. Span is free. I'll list these free ones in the description box below. So check those out. Free to download. I use Span and pretty much every mix as well. This sits on my master bus, and I just kind of use it to reference my frequency spectrum for the things that I can't always hear, because your ears aren't perfect and sometimes you're going to miss stuff. Moving on, Stereo Tool. This does pretty much what it sounds like. It enhances the stereo field, makes stuff wider, and it's pretty easy to use. I don't really use anything else on this but this width knob. And on this, I go pretty subtle. You can go pretty gnarly with it, but sometimes I like to keep it at like a dB or below, and just moving it to the right makes your sound a little bit wider. Sometimes I'll put this on buses. Sometimes I'll put this on parallel compression buses, which I'll probably make a video on that. Sometimes, actually, I think that's in my compression video. Check that out if you want to learn more about compression. But yeah, that's just this. It's just a stereo enhancer. Make stuff wider, basically. Try it on hi-hats. Try not to do it on bass. Bass doesn't like to be wide. It's not very good for it. And sometimes you get a little phasing once you get too wide, but use your ears, listen to it, listen to your mixes in mono, see if sometimes if it's in mono and you go too wide out here, the sound will start to disappear. That's how you know you've went too far. So generally for me, a dB or less is pretty good. Free plugin, check it out. Moving on, the MV Meter 2. The last free plugin I'm going to share with you today is just a meter. It's a VU meter. You can adjust your reference level according to how loud your mix is. If you're doing a pre-master, it's going to be pretty quiet, so adjust your reference level accordingly. Or if you're putting it on a master that's got a limiter on it, it's going to be pretty loud, so adjust it again accordingly. And I like to use this. Here's a little tip, since you've stayed with me this long, little pro tip. I like to import reference tracks, basically my favorite songs, my favorite techno songs. Let's say one by Jay Lumen, makes excellent techno tracks. If you don't know him, check him out, Jay Lumen. And I'll import a song that I like, and I'll play it with the reference level set to 0, because that can handle the most volume without getting up here and peaking. And I'll see that this will give me a readout down here in the current. It'll give me a number readout, or you can just look at the needle. It'll show you like how loud his track is. And if I want to send tracks to that same label or match that sound, when I'm in the mastering phase, I try to match that. I try to get as loud as I can, of course, tastefully, without distorting or anything. Yeah, and that's just one way I use it. I like to reference it and put it on my master bus and see how loud my favorite tracks are, and try to get mine just as loud. Because again, it'll give you like a number readout here, which is super easy. It'll say like, oh, minus 1.7 decibels, and that's when you master your track. Just try to get it up to minus 1.7 decibels without distorting, because if it does, then back it off a little bit. These are pros you're contending with. You can't always beat them, but very useful. Very, very useful. Just a plain old VU meter. Anyways, yeah, that's it. These main staples: EQ, compression, distortion, saturation, harmonic excitement, whatever you want to call it. Those are going to be in every single DAW. And then these are free in the description box below, like I said. And until next time, make some music. Peace.